Good morning once again. Thank you very much for staying with TV3. This is New Day, and just gone by was the newspaper review segment. Time now to talk agriculture and all the other major components connected with agriculture. And there's an institution or a company that has several years of experience in handling that, and they have a major project coming up, and we are here to talk about it. Let me introduce my guest, then we can go straight into the discussion. I have Gyamfi with me. He is the Regional Director for Solidary Dad West Africa. Solidary Dad West Africa. That's an interesting name. All right, good morning, sir. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, Martin.
Yes, to start with, can you help us understand what Solidary Dad, we were told the company is called Solidary Dad West Africa Global, but what is it and what do you do?
Thank you very much, Martin. Solidary Dad is a global network organization, and we are committed to promoting sustainable supply chains. And through this effort, we intervene at the level that promotes development in communities where our farmers live. We intervene at the level that leads to what we call resilient agricultural supply chains or sustainable agricultural supply chains. We also intervene at the level that impacts on climate because of the changing climatic conditions. We want to impact at the level where agriculture is done in a manner that is sustainable and preserves the ecosystem integrity. And by and large, through our interventions, we also impact on economic development of the various countries in which we operate as a network organization.
Yes, if you say you're a network organization, what does that mean?
Solidary Dad is a global organization. We operate from 9 different hubs across the globe. And these 9 hubs are distributed on 5 continents of the world. So we have the West African hub, which I'm the regional director. We have a hub in South Africa. We have a hub in East Africa, taking care of operations of East and Central Africa. Then we have a hub in South America. We have a hub in Europe, where our global secretariat also sits. We have a hub in Southeast Asia in New Delhi. So these are the hubs that operate together to constitute the Solidary network. And that's what I mean if I say we're a network organization. We're a global organization, and we're operating in about 48 countries currently.
And if you say you're focused on sustainable supply chain, can you help us understand that sustainable supply chain?
Thank you. If you take any commodity, there are a lot of different actors in those chains. Let's take a typical supply chain, which is one of the supply chains we work on in, say, West Africa. We are working on 6 different commodities: cocoa, oil palm, cotton and soy, maize systems, and we're also working in gold, in supporting small-scale artisanal gold miners to adopt best production practices. So if we take one of these supply chains, what we mean is that we intervene at the level that the producer of that commodity, the marketer of that commodity, the trader, the one involved in storage, the one involved in value addition, we engage with all these players to ensure that that production chain is resilient, everybody sees economic benefits, and they want to stay in those supply chains and do what they do. So until we create that system, the supply chain is not sustainable, because if it's good for the farmer and the marketer or the transporter doesn't see business in it, then he's not going to engage. So when I say sustainable supply chains, I mean we're working across the supply chain in a manner that it creates that win-win situation for all the
key players within the chain.
Absolutely.
But I think that has been one of the major problems we have had in Ghana, with specific focus on our agricultural sector, because the farmers say they produce, but they have problems with people who come and cart these items to the end consumer. And then also there are those who say they are expecting some product, but they don't know who to contact and all of that. So that is where you're focused on, from the producer to the final consumer.
Absolutely. I think you've put in a very, very excellent balance. If you're unable to connect production with the market, then the supply chain is not sustainable. So we are intervening to make sure that the benefits created, the wealth created along that chain, everybody benefits and continues to stay in that business. Okay. So all the 13 supply chains we work across globally. We are then engaging with the public sector institutions because they are involved. Okay. We are engaging with the private sector institutions. We are engaging with donors and other development investors because they all have a role to play along that chain.
Yeah. All right. And that brings me to my next question. There is what has been dubbed Ambition 2020 coming up. Please tell us about it.
As a global network organization, over the last 1.5 years, we have spent enormous time engaging with various development actors, various private sector companies, various institutions, to identify what the critical development issues and challenges are along the different commodities that we engage in. Okay. And we've been able to isolate 4 core thematic areas that needs to be addressed if we are to create resilient supply chains. And these core areas are ensuring that producers are using best practices. If I talk of best practices, it can be agronomy. They are using the right agronomic practices. They are adopting right practices that creates the incentive to preserve the environment. They are using practices that are socially responsible and acceptable, and there's also economic benefits, all right? So we are addressing 4 thematic areas: good practices. And when people learn how to use good practices, they need a certain supportive infrastructure to be able to fully adopt that. So we are intervening at the level of creating very robust agricultural or production infrastructure. It could be access to inputs and services. It could be access to markets. It could be access to technology. Then we're investing again at a third level, a third pillar called the landscape level. Okay. We're trying to help that production takes place within a well-managed landscape. Because if you are doing agriculture, somebody is doing mining in the same landscape. Somebody is running his or her own cattle ranch in the same landscape. So how do you ensure that everybody does it right? Yeah, okay. So that the long-term environmental benefits and resilience is created. And at the last level, we are intervening at the level of dialoguing and working with our partners to engage with governments and other institutions to create the right enabling environment for producers to thrive. So across these 4 thematic areas, we have designed specific interventions and activities. And this is what we've packaged within the next medium term, and we have christened it Ambition 2020, to see what kind of changes we can bring in these 4 thematic areas, of course not losing sight of the need to address gender-related issues, innovation-related
And all of
issues.
this affects, all of this has your core target in mind. These are thematic areas you have designed with your main target in mind, isn't it?
Sure. Our main target is to make sure that the farmer or the producer is getting benefits and want to stay in the business. And in addressing those 4 key areas, we want to make sure that all the supply chain actors, the challenges associated with their work is also addressed. As you rightly said, at times the market is demanding certain commodities with certain attributes. How does the market communicate this need to the producer? That's what we are interested in, to bridge that gap.
Well, so those are, help us understand what are, and very briefly, the major highlights of the launch.
The launch is to create this awareness about this medium-term plan, because clearly, Solidary Dad, we believe that we cannot address the entire development constituency in isolation. We need the right partnerships, we need the right engagement with various institutions and civil society organizations, non-governmental organizations, to be able to prosecute this agenda. So the main highlights of this event of launching the Ambition 2020 is to bring these stakeholders around, apart from those who belong to the Solidary Dad fraternity, to expose, as it were, these key areas and how we see the needed change that needs to be achieved, and what are the mechanisms that we are going to use to achieve those changes, so that we get a massive buy-in into this ambition, and then we can, beyond the launch, engage with partners to identify the resources to be able to execute this agenda within the next 5 years globally across all the 9 hubs where we operate. And the choice was to launch this event in Ghana. So we'll be hosting 120 of our colleagues, our delegates from the 48 countries. We have invited our development partners, those we work with on a daily basis, and those conventional development investors. Agence Française Développement, USAID, the World Bank, African Development Bank, the ECOWAS, NEPAD, the private companies.
Major partners that you work with.
All the major partners are invited. And it's a very simple but profound plenary where we welcome these people. We have a speech by the Dutch.
But you know, normally we've had some of these launches, and in conclusion, after the launch, what are the plans in place?
Well, after the launch, we would have created first the awareness, we have created the buy-in, then the different hubs of Solidary Dad. For instance, I'm in charge of West Africa. We're now going to engage more rigorously with the various private sector and other development investors now to identify the resources and which areas do we engage in, and then we can measure the impacts and the outcomes that we'll be achieving over the next medium term. And then we see how these achievements contribute to the bigger sustainable development goals that the world is seeking to achieve. And I'm happy to say His Excellency the President has been invited to do this official launch, and it's very important for us as an organization.
So the date of the event is on the 15th?
Tuesday 15th at 10 o'clock at the Royal Sinchi Resort Hotel near Akosombo.
All right. So you have heard it for yourself. If you're in agriculture at any part of the chain and you're interested in knowing how it can be sustained for all the key players to have a win-win situation, then you should be at the launch of the Ambition 2020 event on the 15th at the Royal Sinchi. I want to say a big thank you to Isaac Gyamfi. He is the Regional Director for Solidary Dad West Africa. Good morning and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Martin.
So